Alright, so welcome back everybody. So for this video, I'm going to explain the birds that have the round end ability first. Okay? So let's get started on these birds. There's about 15 or 16 of these birds here, and they're all pretty much more or less different. So first here we have the black stork. With this one, you'll lay one egg on each of the birds immediately to the left and to the right of this bird. So if this bird was here, it would be this bird and this bird that would get to lay one egg on each of your birds. So here and here with this ability. And this is a round end ability. So you get to do this at the end of each round. So if you were to do this in the first round, you could potentially get to do this ability 4 times. So that's pretty cool. Okay, with this one, you can lay one egg on this bird for each bird to its left in this row. So if this bird was here, for instance, then you would get to lay 2 eggs on this bird because there are 2 birds to its left. If there were 2 birds here, obviously you normally wouldn't be able to put a bird here if there wasn't birds here anyway. But if this is played later in the game, you could get more eggs. But most likely, you're going to want to play this somewhat early. You don't want to play it first, for sure, and you might not even want to play it second, but you could potentially try to get it here maybe, and then potentially get to do this 2 or 3 times to get a bunch of eggs. But remember, there's only 4 eggs that can be on this bird anyway, so just make a mental note of that. You might want to, if you have to pay an egg cost, you might want to pay it from this bird. Okay, so here we go. The bearded reedling. For each other bird in this column with an egg on it, lay 1 egg on this bird. So column would be like this, and the other birds in this column would, or this column or whatever this bird happens to be in, would have to have an egg on it. And then if they did have an egg on it, you could lay at most 2 eggs on this bird, okay? 2 eggs on this bird at most. That's assuming you have birds in the column and they have eggs on them. But that's something you could do every round, at the end of every round. So cool. Okay, so this one, the ruddy shell duck, you draw 5 cards from the deck. You add 1 to your hand, and then you tuck 1 behind this bird, and you discard the rest. So you get to keep 1 for yourself, you get to tuck 1 for an extra point at the end of the game, but then you also have to discard the other cards, okay? That's how that one's going to work. And like I said, you could potentially use this a few times, depending on what round you play it, because it's round end. Okay, this one has almost the exact same ability, it just has 1 additional thing on it. So the Mandarin duck does the exact same thing. You draw 5 cards. You add 1 card to your hand. You tuck 1 card behind this bird, and you give 1 card to another player, and then discard the rest. So you're discarding 2, basically. Your opponent's getting a card, you're getting a point, and you're getting 1 for your hand. So it's interactive. It's a good card still, nonetheless. Your opponents will definitely like you for it, for giving them a card. Obviously, you're only giving 1 player a card, though, so you're picking who you're giving it to. So anyways, with this bird, you draw 2 cards from the deck and add them to your hand. Then tuck any 2 cards from your hand behind this bird. So you're getting to draw 2 cards, and then you have to tuck 2 cards from your hand behind this bird, but it can be any 2 cards you want. And this is a round end ability. This one you can draw 2 cards from the deck and add them to your hand, and then you can tuck up to 2 cards from your hand behind this bird. So while this one isn't optional, as in you have to tuck 2 birds from your hand after you draw 2 cards, this one is optional. You can tuck up to 2. So that means you could tuck nothing if you want to. If you don't want to tuck any birds, you can tuck nothing. But you can also tuck 1, or you can tuck 2. So, cool. All right. For this one, for every 3 eggs in your wetlands, draw 1 card from the deck. You may tuck up to 2 cards from your hand behind this bird. So this one's interesting. this is something you might want to play later in the game, because you might have potentially more birds in your wetlands, but you also might potentially have more eggs in the wetlands, and that's what it means, eggs. So in order to activate this, you have to have at least 3. I mean, you don't have to have at least 3 to activate it, but in order to draw cards from the deck, you have to have at least 3 eggs in your wetlands somewhere, okay? And then you may tuck up to 2 cards from your hand behind this bird. So even if you weren't able to draw a card, you can still tuck up to 2 cards from your hand behind this bird for extra points. But you would potentially maybe want to draw at least 1 card to increase the chances of you not wanting to utilize a card, as in play it into your aviary, so you can just simply get points for it. So that's kind of an interesting card, to say the least. It would be interesting to see if and how many cards you could potentially get, or how many eggs you could potentially get in your wetlands. So that's basically how this card works. Very interesting. This one has the exact same, well, it has a very similar ability to this one, but it's still very different. So it's a different variation. For every 3 eggs in your savanna, okay, so 3 eggs in your savanna, for every 3, you can gain 1 invertebrate or 1 seed from the supply. Well, that's interesting. So you could gain a food. If you have at least 3 eggs here, you can gain a food. Cool. You may also cache up to 2 of them on this bird. So if you had 6 eggs and you gained a seed and you gained an invertebrate or any combination of the 2, you could tuck both of them, or say you could cache both of them on this bird if you wanted to. If you wanted to. Or up to 2. It's your choice, right? But what's really interesting is it's saying you can only do 2. So if for somehow, some way, you had more than, like if you had 9 eggs in your savanna, if you had 9 eggs, then you could potentially get 3 food from the supply of this combination, okay? But you can only cache 2 of those. You would only be able to cache 2 of those 3. So there's a limit to the amount of food you can cache, but there isn't a limit to the amount of food you could potentially gain. It's only, your only limitation is how many eggs you have in your savanna. Pretty cool. Okay, so this one has the exact same ability as the last one, except instead of eggs in your savanna, it's eggs in your forest. Okay, but other than that, it's exactly the same. So we will move on. Okay, the Sri Lanka blue magpie. You may cache 1 food from your supply on each of your other birds. Whew, this is interesting. So it's contingent on how much food you have in your supply, okay? And it's also contingent on how many birds you have when you activate this round ability. But if you wanted to, you could cache food on every bird in your aviary that you can afford to cache from your supply. That's very interesting. And this is something you can do at the end of the round, so you could potentially do it a few times, but that does mean if you're going to do that a lot, you could potentially not have food very often, and playing other birds would be difficult. But it might be something to do in the last round when you no longer have a need for food, because you can't utilize food anymore for anything, really. Then you could potentially get some extra points that way if you have extra food at the end of the game. But remember, it's something a round end, so whether it's the 4th round, 3rd round, 2nd round, or 1st round, it could potentially help you. And it says you may cache 1 from your supply on each of your other birds. So it's kind of interesting. You don't have to, for sure. This one is very similar to the last one, except it's on each bird in the same row as the house crow. So it's 1 food that you can cache from your supply on each bird in the same row as the house crow. This one, it's each of your other birds. So, interesting, but basically the same thing. Okay, this one's interesting too. If you used all 4 types of actions this turn, or this round, you gain 2 food from the supply. What does that mean? Well, that means if you're going to activate this ability at the end of the round, that round, you would have had to play at least 1 bird, you would have had to gain food at least once, you would have had to lay eggs at least once, and you would have had to draw on bird cards at least once that round. You would have to have done all 4, and then if you did, you'd get to gain 2 food from the supply at the end of each round. This one is awesome. Most likely, you could potentially do all 4 in a particular round, and I would usually probably do all 4 in every round. So man, I love this ability. That's awesome. And each round, sweet, very sweet. Okay, so this one is also very similar to the last one, except it's got more going on with it. If you used all 4 actions this round, you can gain 1 food from the supply, you can lay 1 egg on any bird, and you can draw a card from the deck. So you get to do 3 different things if you used all 4 actions. I like this one even better than the last, because you get a food, you get an egg, and you get to draw a card. Sweet! That is awesome. The black-naped, can never pronounce that, is an awesome bird. Power for sure. Okay, the Philippine Eagle. This one you'll roll all 5 dice. Okay, you may re-roll any number of dice up to 2 times. Okay, so let's say you roll 5 dice and you don't get any rodents. You could do it again and again. But you want to try to increase your chances of getting rodents, because if at least 3 rodents are showing when you stop, you draw 2 bonus cards and you get to keep 1, and then you reset the bird feeder. So let's say you roll 5 dice, and only 1 of the 5 dice is a rodent. Well, then you can re-roll the other 4 dice. Ooh, I got another rodent. So then I can do it again. I can re-roll the other 3 dice, and ooh, I got another rodent. I made it in time to draw 2 bonus cards, and I get to keep 1. And I could do this at the end of every round. So if I play this early in the game, I could do this 4 times. That's an awesome, awesome ability. Okay, and then the Oriental Bay Owl. At the end of each round, activate the when activated brown powers of all your other hunting and fishing birds. So that's really cool. This is definitely new, getting to activate brown powers. Okay, that's really interesting. All of them. All of your brown powers. So if you have a lot of brown powers with this icon, with the hunting and fishing icon, you could activate a whole bunch of cool stuff, getting also who knows what. But man, that's unique. This is definitely a unique power to the Asia expansion. Very cool ability. Love to see this one in action. You know, when you actually have a lot of this particular power for sure. Well, that's it for this video. We have covered almost half of the cards in this expansion. So in the next video, we will talk about these birds, and hopefully we can get through them all in one video. We'll see how that works out. But if you guys like this video, don't forget to leave me a like, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye!